The engineer stood at the edge of the canal and squinted at something caught against the lock gate. He thought it was a farm animal at first, drifted down from one of the properties upstream. But when he drew closer, when he saw the small hand breaking the surface of the water, he stepped back. By evening, half of Chicago would know the name. But the question would remain unanswered for more than a century. What happened to the child in the red dress? Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you are from and what time you are watching. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let us begin. It was Saturday, the 8th of April, 1911, in the city of Chicago, Illinois. Spring rain had softened the unpaved roads of the South Side, and the smell of coal smoke hung low between the wooden tenements. On South Albany Avenue, near the corner where bread was sold by the half loaf and milk was delivered by cart, a family named Parobek occupied a modest dwelling. They were immigrants from eastern Bohemia, part of the Austria-Hungary Empire, and they had brought with them the language and customs of a distant land. The father, known as Frank, worked as a painter. The mother, Carolina, remained at home to manage the household and care for the children. There were several of them, and the eldest daughter was called Elsie, though her christened name was Elisa. She was 5 years old, fair-haired with blue eyes and a quiet disposition. On that April morning, she wore a red one-piece dress, black stockings, and lace shoes. She had been given permission to walk alone to her aunt's house, a journey of 3 blocks through streets where children played without supervision and neighbors knew one another by sight. By dusk, she had not returned. By morning, the police had been summoned. By the 9th of May, the city would learn what the canal had kept hidden. Elsie left the house shortly before noon. Her mother watched her go, watched the small figure turn the corner toward South Troy Street, where her aunt, Mrs. Julia Trampota, lived at number 2325. The distance was not great. The route was familiar. There was no reason to expect difficulty. The child walked slowly, as children do when there is no urgency to their errand. The streets were busy with Saturday commerce. Carts rolled past on iron-rimmed wheels. Women stood in doorways, shaking rugs and calling to one another in Czech and Polish and German. The smell of boiled cabbage drifted from open windows. Somewhere a dog barked, and the bells of a distant church marked the hour. Near the corner of 23rd Street, Elsie encountered her cousin Josie, a girl of 9, who stood with other children watching an organ grinder. The man turned the crank, and the music rose thin and bright in the spring air. The children pressed close, fascinated by the mechanism and the small monkey that sat upon the grinder's shoulder, holding out a tin cup. Elsie stopped to listen. She stayed while the music played. She watched the monkey take coins from outstretched hands. When the organ grinder finished, he moved on toward the corner of 23rd Street. Most of the children followed, but Elsie did not. She remained where she was, standing alone on the pavement, and then she turned and walked in a different direction. No one thought to ask why. No one called her back. Hours passed. The afternoon grew long. Carolina Parobek went to her sister's house to collect her daughter, expecting to find her asleep on the sofa or playing in the yard. But Julia told her that Elsie had never arrived. Carolina was puzzled, but not yet alarmed. The child had many friends in the neighborhood. She had likely stopped to visit one of them and lost track of time. By evening, when Frank Parobek returned from work, his wife told him that Elsie had not come home. He did not wait. He walked immediately to the police station on Hinman Street and reported his daughter missing. The officers assured him that children often wandered. They suggested she had fallen asleep at a friend's house. They told him to return in the morning if she had not appeared. But morning came, and Elsie was still gone. On Sunday, the 9th of April, Frank Parobek returned to the police station. This time, Police Captain John Mahoney took note. He ordered a search. Detectives were summoned from neighboring stations. Officers were dispatched to canvass the streets, to knock on doors, to question anyone who might have seen a small girl in a red dress. Word spread quickly through the Czech community. Neighbors gathered to discuss the matter. Theories were offered and discarded. Some said the child had wandered too far and become lost. Others feared she had fallen into one of the drainage canals that cut through the south side, deep and swift and unforgiving. On Monday, a boy named John Yoski came forward with information. He said he had seen a Romany wagon on Kenzie Avenue, just 1 block west of Troy Street on the day Elsie disappeared. In the wagon, he claimed, were 2 women, and one of them held a young girl who matched Elsie's description. The police seized upon this account. They turned their attention to a settlement of Romany wagons near the river, where families lived in painted caravans and earned their keep through trade and fortune-telling. Detectives descended upon the camp. They questioned the residents. They searched the wagons. They discovered that one family had departed on the morning of the 9th, just hours after Elsie had been reported missing. The theory took hold. The child had been taken by Romany travelers, stolen to work as a beggar on the streets. It was not without precedent. 4 years earlier, a girl named Lillian Wolfe had been abducted and later recovered from a similar camp. Frank Parobek offered his life savings, $50, as a reward for information. The police chief ordered the dragging of drainage canals. A 14-year-old girl named Emma Kubat told officers she had seen Elsie in the company of an organ grinder. Detectives traveled to the Italian Quarter on West 14th and South Halstead Streets, where organ grinders were known to lodge, but their inquiries yielded nothing of substance. On the 12th of April, Elsie's photograph appeared in the newspapers. It had been enhanced by an artist to make the features clearer. She was described as small, with light golden hair and blue eyes. The image was reprinted in subsequent editions, a daily reminder that the child remained missing. Days passed. The search expanded. Reports came in from neighboring towns. Elsie had been seen in Round Lake. Elsie had been seen in Volo. Elsie had been seen in McHenry. But none of the sightings led anywhere. And still the child did not return. Detectives traveled to Round Lake, 50 miles northwest of Chicago, following reports that a Romany wagon had been seen with a young girl inside. Local farmers were instructed to watch for any arrivals. But when officers located the wagon and searched it, they found only a child who belonged to the family, a girl who bore no resemblance to Elsie Parobek. On the 17th of April, Captain Mahoney received an anonymous telephone call. The caller claimed that a child matching Elsie's description had been seen with a man at a hotel in Western Springs. Detectives were dispatched. The hotel was searched. Nothing was found. Meanwhile, the Parobek family received a ransom note demanding $500 for Elsie's safe return. The police neither confirmed nor denied its authenticity, but they acknowledged that such a letter might have been sent. Frank Parobek also received anonymous letters, written in English, accusing him and his wife of mistreating their daughter. The letters claimed that Elsie was being hidden by someone who hated the family. Enraged, Frank burned the letters before detectives could examine them. On the 20th of April, Elsie's 6-year-old brother, Frank Jr., was found digging in South Troy Street with a pick and shovel. When questioned, he said he had overheard his parents say that his sister might have fallen into a hole left by road workers and been buried under sand and gravel. The workers were questioned. They assured police that no such accident had occurred. By the 23rd of April, Lieutenant John Costello declared that all leads had been exhausted. He feared the child was dead, her body hidden in a cellar or barn. Search teams inspected vacant buildings and derelict structures. The Romany wagons were monitored. Alerts were issued to neighboring police departments. The newspapers continued to report on the case. The Czech community came together in solidarity. Mayor Carter Harrison Jr. and Alderman Anton Cermak offered additional rewards for information. Lieutenant Costello remained convinced that Elsie had fallen into a drainage canal, and he ordered a renewed search of the waterways. It was now a month since the child had disappeared. On the 7th of May, Captain Mahoney reached a grim conclusion. He announced to the press that Elsie Parobek was dead. Despite this, he vowed to continue the search, to find her body, and to bring those responsible to justice. 2 days later, the canal gave up what it had been hiding. On the 9th of May, 1911, at the Lockport Power Plant, 35 miles outside of Chicago, An electrical engineer named George T. Scully observed something floating in the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. He thought at first it was an animal, perhaps a calf or pig that had drifted down from a nearby farm. He called to his colleagues, and together they went out to retrieve it. What they pulled from the water was the body of a young girl. The corpse was small, dressed in a red garment, and bore a striking resemblance to the description of Elsie Parobek that had appeared in the newspapers for weeks. The authorities were notified. Police Lieutenant Costello traveled to the site. Frank Parobek was summoned to identify the body. At first, the father could not be certain. The child's face had been altered by time and water. But when Carolina Parobek was brought to view the remains, she confirmed without hesitation that it was her daughter. An inquest was convened at the funeral parlor, presided over by Coroner William Werrick and a jury of community members. Frank Parobek appeared as a witness. Through a translator, he stated his belief that Elsie had been murdered, that she had been abducted and killed, and that her body had been disposed of in the canal. Two physicians, Dr. E. A. Kingston and Dr. W. Paddock, conducted an initial examination. They confirmed the absence of water in the child's lungs, ruling out drowning as the cause of death. Dr. Kingston stated that Elsie had been attacked and murdered before being placed in the water. Dr. Paddock noted signs of injury consistent with violence inflicted prior to death. Both physicians estimated that the body had been in the water for approximately 2 weeks. A second examination was conducted by Dr. E. R. Lount and Dr. Warren H. Hunter. Their findings differed. They concluded that the child had suffocated but found no clear evidence of violent assault. Coroner Peter Hoffman concurred with this assessment and urged further investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death. If you are finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so let us know your thoughts on this case below. Now let us continue. Lieutenant Costello announced that 40 detectives had been assigned to the case. He stated that the person responsible likely resided in the neighborhood where Elsie had lived. The police scrutinized every aspect of the Parobek family's history since their arrival in Chicago, searching for adversaries or anyone with motive to harm the child. Inspector Healy expressed confidence that an arrest would be made within a week. The newspapers reported daily on the investigation. The reward for information was increased, but despite the assurances, no suspect was immediately identified. The funeral was held on the 12th of May, 1911. Nearly 3,000 mourners attended. The service began at the Parobek home, where the streets filled with neighbors and strangers alike. People watched from bedroom windows and doorsteps. The atmosphere was solemn and heavy with grief. Elsie's coffin was small and white, adorned with flowers. Young girls stood around it, holding bouquets. Carolina Parobek requested a final glimpse of her daughter, but relatives persuaded her to allow the undertaker to proceed. The procession moved slowly through the streets to the Bohemian National Cemetery, where the child was laid to rest. Police Chief John McWeeny announced that the Chicago Police Department would devote all available resources to apprehending the person responsible. The newspapers covered the funeral extensively. The community mourned openly. But behind the public displays of sorrow, the investigation faltered. Detectives now focused on the area where Elsie's body had been discovered. They questioned residents near the canal. They searched for anyone who might have been in the vicinity on the 8th of April. A man named Joseph Kesty, described as a bearded bohemian and hermit peddler, came under suspicion. He lived in a shack near the drainage canal on West 33rd Street and South Kenzie Avenue, close to the Parobek residence. A search of his dwelling uncovered a green hair ribbon and signs of a shallow excavation. There was also an old hemp sack that detectives believed could have been used to conceal a body. The shack's owner, a man named David Shays, told police he had evicted Kesty on the 9th of May because of concerns about his interactions with children. But before detectives could question him, Joseph Kesty threw himself in front of a train on the 10th of May, one day after Elsie's body had been found. He died instantly. On the 15th of May, the police announced that they did not believe Kesty had been responsible for Elsie's death, though they offered no explanation for this conclusion. Other suspects were considered and dismissed. A well-dressed man found dead in the Willow Springs Canal, bearing only a Polish prayer card, was investigated but ruled out. A man named Canella, described as a religious enthusiast and possibly mentally unstable, fled when approached by detectives and was never seen again. The investigation continued for weeks, then months, but no arrests were made. No charges were filed. The person responsible for Elsie Parobek's death was never identified. The case remained unsolved. The search eventually diminished. Detectives were reassigned. The newspapers moved on to other stories. The Parobek family was left to endure their grief in private, without answers, without justice, without closure. 2 years later, on the 12th of May, 1913, Frank Parobek died at the age of 45. He was buried beside his daughter in the Bohemian National Cemetery. Karolina lived 14 more years, passing away on the 9th of December, 1927. She too was laid to rest beside Elsie. The family plot was marked with simple stones, the names weathered by rain and time. For 46 years, the murder of Elsie Parobek lingered as a haunting mystery, spoken of occasionally by those who remembered, but fading gradually from public memory. Then, in 1973, a man named Henry Darger died in obscurity in Chicago. He had worked as a custodian, lived alone, and spoken to few people. But when his landlord, a photographer named Nathan Lerner, entered his room after his death, he discovered something extraordinary. Darger had left behind a vast body of work, paintings, collages, and a sprawling manuscript titled The Story of the Vivian Girls, accompanied by intricate illustrations. An art historian named Michael Bonesteel examined the collection and found within it repeated references to a character named Annie Ehrenberg, a leader of a child slave rebellion who met a violent death at the hands of her captors. According to Darger's diary, he had lost a photograph of a young girl and had been desperately searching for a replacement. He did not provide a name, but he noted that the picture had appeared in the Chicago Daily News in May, June, or July of 1911. Researchers who later examined the newspaper archives found a photograph of Elsie Parobek published during that period. A portrait of Annie Ehrenberg, painted by Darger, depicted a blonde-haired girl wearing a hair ribbon. The color of her dress resembled that worn by Elsie in the photograph. Some believed that Darger had been responsible for the crime. Others argued that he was merely inspired by the tragedy, that his art reflected a lifelong fascination with innocence, violence, and justice. The truth remains unknown. No evidence connected Darger to Elsie's death. No confession was ever made. The case was never officially closed, and no suspect was ever charged. Today, the file remains in the records of the Chicago Police Department, bound in dust and silence. The street where Elsie lived has been renamed. The canal has been rerouted. The houses where she played have been torn down and replaced. But in the Bohemian National Cemetery, beneath the shade of old trees, 3 stones stand together: Frank, Karolina, and Elsie Parobek. The dates are carved clearly. The story is not forgotten. But the question, after more than a century, remains unanswered. What happened to the child in the red dress?